Welcome, travelers, to another episode of the Time Travel Podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Hyde.
And we're the
Time Travel Trio. I
Just
never realized how
felt like
much you
being
are
Laros.
Yeah. You're like the pace car. I just didn't realize. I was like, oh,
Right.
the tempo has changed.
Take it away and the train derails. That's how that works. So, today's episode is my choice, but before we get into that, we have a little announcement. I guess not a little announcement. We have an announcement.
It's minuscule.
Sure. We have an announcement, minuscule or otherwise. We started this podcast on Back to the Future Day. Some of you may or may not realize our first episode of Back to the Future. We released on October 21st, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So we're approaching 3 years, and we kind of feel like we've, gave a great, strong effort, and we've decided to end the podcast. So our final episode will actually be released on Halloween, which is October 31st, obviously, of 2018. And that will be episode 80. And, that's almost exactly 3 years.
Yeah.
And we feel that it's time to, close our time travel book. We did, at that point, it will be 80 episodes, which is a lot of time travel.
Yeah, more than 80 well, maybe around 80, because we also did some TV shows too. But,
Mhm.
yeah, over 80 movies and TV shows. And obviously we didn't cover everything, but at this point, we've covered most facets of time travel, I feel like.
We'll have covered everything by the end that we've wanted to cover, and after so many times, there stops being something new for us to kind of discuss after a while.
Right. And it's exciting for people to get to hear their favorite time travel movies or movies that happen to have time travel in them or movies that they're just curious to think what we think about it.
Mhm.
But after a while, it's like you kind of get... Not that it's still fun right now, but we can definitely tell that by the time we get to around 3 years, this is a good, healthy place to stop
Mhm.
before it becomes something that's not fun and that we kind of resent. And,
Yeah.
you don't want... I've heard podcasts where that happens, where it keeps going on past its natural end, and
Yeah.
they all are just so sick of doing it, and that's no fun for us or for you, the listeners. So I think this is kind of a good place, and we're all getting to do one that we really wanted to do. We've known we were going to do this for a while, so we've held off on all of us doing one that either some sort of program that we've wanted to talk about for a long time but haven't ever had the chance to.
Mhm.
So these the next three that we're going to do
After this one.
this
Yeah.
are ones that we are really big, not necessarily fans of, but something we just really want to discuss. And then if the last episode, I believe we're going to do something kind of really cool about it.
Yeah, a retrospective type thing
Yeah,
that
we're
still...
going to kind of take a look back. We're going to go through, separately, we'll go through some episodes and kind of, 3 years is a long time, and we've seen so many movies, and some of the bigger movies, which we did a lot of the big ones up front, after now stepping back and seeing some of the other things, we can kind of compare a little bit and reassess. So it'll be a fun final episode. That'll be episode 80, and so this episode that I picked today will be our last, I put in quotes, movie, because the final 3 that we've picked are either TV shows or miniseries. So, as to good segue as any to lead into it, I actually feel like this is a great last movie for us to discuss. This was really... I'm glad we got to see this one. I've chosen the 1979 movie Time After Time. It was directed by Nicholas Meyer and stars Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen. The description says, H.G. Wells pursues Jack the Ripper to the 20th century when the serial murderer uses the future writer's time machine to escape his time period. So that's what we'll be discussing today. And yeah. We'll just get into it.
Well, we've
Nice.
already done a Nicholas Meyer film.
Yes.
Technically, he did not direct, but he did write Star Trek for The Journey Home.
Mhm.
With Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a film. If you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to that too. If you've seen the movie, because that's a really fun one. That's an interesting movie to talk about. And you can definitely see some. We're not going to spoil Journey Home in this podcast, but you can definitely see certain strings of like his influence
Yeah.
showing
Yeah,
up in
there's
here.
there's similarities.
Yeah, even before I realized that Nicholas Meyer had written or co-written Voyage Home, I felt the similarities of both movies, and so it totally made sense.
Future man and past man in present day San Francisco. That's
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so what did you guys think? Hyde, what did you think of this movie?
Overall, I enjoyed it. It's not perfect film, and I know we're going to get more into that. But, it's, especially for the time period it came out on, like, it's really trying to push the limits of, like, a low-budget sci-fi film, and the performances are very charming. It's an interesting story. H.G. Wells is the hero, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's different in many ways. I think it is more interesting to have someone in the past, having done so many time travel movies. I think it's more interesting to have someone in the past and the future, because a future person, there's always something they can do to kind of prove, like, look, I am from the future. I know what's about to happen, and like.
Right.
But when someone's from the past, they really do. They have to learn everything. They have to like figure stuff out, and there's really no way they can prove that they are from the past.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it kind of makes it a little bit different. I enjoyed the movie. I don't know if I would ever really want to see it again, but I enjoyed watching it. I don't feel like it was a waste of my time, especially after seeing so many time travel movies at this point, honestly.
Yeah.
I liked it. I thought Malcolm McDowell did a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, for what it was good. I mean, it's basically a sci-fi kind of thriller movie from 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And for what it is, it did it pretty well. I think nowadays we see this kind of thing, where this type of story where someone's trying to chase after someone else, and so the twists aren't as mind blowing, but maybe for the time they were more original. But for what it was still pretty good.
Yeah. What would you say would be the twists of this movie?
Well, I mean, the way that it all works out, like a killer trying to go after a girl, and he's trying to save the girl, and
right.
like she falls asleep, and then he kidnaps her and all that stuff,
Right. And then it actually turns out to be her friend who died.
Yeah.
And, all that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's play the trailer. It's a little bit long, but it'll
all those 70s trailers.
Yeah, it'll give you a good idea of the movie. That's for sure.
The time is 1893, and novelist and inventor H.G. Wells invites you to join him on a flight from London to San Francisco. In under a minute, you will be transported to a bizarre and fantastic new age. Today, time after time. For H.G. Wells, the modern world offers a spectacular array of revelations, embarrassments, and delights.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
What's up, Doc?
I beg your pardon?
You were saying where to?
Could you please take me as quickly as possible to the Hyatt?
But Wells has not come here as a tourist. His visit will be somewhat more dangerous. For he is pursuing Jack the Ripper, a villain who has eluded his fate by escaping into time.
90 years ago, I was a freak. Today, I'm an amateur. I'm obliged to take you back to face the consequences of your acts.
You take me back. How do you propose to do that? By force?
Be reasonable, John. We don't belong here.
A 19th century gentleman.
What?
You don't close your eyes.
And a 20th century woman
Well, neither do you.
join forces to capture a criminal from the past at large in the modern world. But even more than they want him, he needs them.
You throw me the key, and I'll release the girl.
On your honor, John.
You have my word as a gentleman. I would have expected that you'd notice by now that I am not a gentleman. Say goodbye.
Goodbye, Herbert.
You haven't instructed him in the use of one of these machines, have you?
HG, it's checkmate, and you've lost again.
A romantic adventure, a breathless chase around the world and across a century. Time after time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically the movie in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What a trailer.
That was quite a trailer. I definitely think it's kind of trying to catch that Twilight Zone type of vibe.
Yeah.
I could see that being the audience, though, for this movie, too. People who enjoy that show would want to watch this, I would imagine. Maybe.
It's it's definitely like one of those movies where it's like it's trying to be like it's fun, it's exciting, but don't worry, it's not like too like crazy or violent or something. Like they're trying to really sell it as an adventure movie,
Right.
Yeah.
with like a mix of it has something for everyone kind of thing.
The romance, adventure,
A
sci-fi.
breathless chase.
The romance. Okay, let's just talk about Mary Steenburgen just right out the gate because we need to discuss
Her second movie.
her second movie, but also her character in this movie. But yes, it is her, obviously, maybe not obviously, I don't know how much people know. But she is in the third Back to the Future movie. It's kind of the opposite situation where she's someone from the past and Doc Brown is someone from her future and he goes to the past and they fall in love, etc. So it's very similar, but just different times. In this movie, her character is very bold.
Very bold.
She's a progressive woman.
It's not even like she's ready to get it. She needs it. Like she is gonna go after that shit like
She
like a
wants
lion
that
in the
D.
in the
That Malcolm
goat
McD.
pen. Or something. Okay.
The Scottish restaurant. McDougal's. McDonald's.
Okay. She's very bold, which like I guess to be fair to a certain extent, she gives him her number, whatever, he doesn't call, but then he shows up again and she's just like, oh, he's back. Okay,
Tonight,
let's
we're
do
doing
it. And like when they're on the couch, that made me laugh just because to a certain degree, I actually kind of appreciated how bold she was because it's something that movies don't really do. It's like, oh, well, women aren't supposed to be so forward with men. It's, that makes them desperate. Or,
Right.
It's like, it's like, oh, if they're like that, then they must be a whore or something
Right.
like that. So I appreciated in this movie that it wasn't that necessarily wasn't the case. But when they're on the couch and she's like, if you don't take me in your arms right now, I will murder you, or whatever she says.
Yeah.
It just made me laugh. But and he's like, okay.
He was like, well, if you insist. I mean, no, who's going to turn down Mary Steenburgen that many times? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, she's also like, it's so weird because she, especially younger, her voice is like super husky. She has like a super husky
Mhm.
like voice and tone to herself. Like you even hear it like in Back to the Future Part 3. And now that she's gotten older, it's kind of like more mellowed out. Like she still has a very like melodic voice, but it's not as like husky and seductive.
Right.
Even though she still looks great.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting that like
She's married to Ted Danson, right?
Yeah.
That's her. Yeah.
it's so interesting to see like how her like career has evolved.
Absolutely. And which, fun fact, by the way, she and Malcolm McDowell did not meet until this movie, and the director wanted their interaction to be super fresh, and so he didn't have them meet before that first scene when they interact
Oh.
together, and so that their reactions will be very natural. But what he also did not know is that they would actually fall in love in real life, and they were married for 10 years in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
What?
Yeah, 1980 to 1990, I think it said.
I did not know this.
Yeah,
That is so interesting.
that's a fun fact for you.
That is a very
Huh.
fun fact.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that's the moment they fell in love. I don't know.
Wow.
I like to think they're probably still friends.
I'd hope
Maybe
so.
not.
Yeah,
I don't
maybe.
know. Who knows?
Malcolm McDowell's still doing his thing.
Yeah.
They both have very interesting careers.
Yeah, they do. He's great. Man,
Mhm.
I always think of like first season of Heroes.
Yes.
He's been great in a lot of things, but like he also was like really great in that. Anyway, listen to Heroes episode.
Yeah.
But that is, yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to say. I would just kind of point out her brashness.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for the time, she was like not a stereotype of someone at that time, but she was like, I'm sure people like that in the 70s had that mindset. Like, this is how like a feminist should be. Like, you know, I have
Right.
my own career. I'm independent. If I want something, I'll get it. You know, basically.
No, that's true, and I think that's a good point to kind of showcase. And maybe that was also part of the purpose was
Right.
this is what women
Put
are
a
like
spotlight
now
on
versus, you know, the women. We didn't really see him interact with women in the past,
Right.
other than like his housekeeper, but
Yeah.
Who by the way takes time travel like the man like just like went out for the evening.
well,
He's
she
like-
is H.G. Wells's like
It's true.
Yeah, she's
like
been on it.
housekeeper, because I thought that too when I was like, wow, she's like cool. She's just like, all right, you better go clean, you know, dust up this mess for when he comes back. But I'm also like, yeah, but like, she also, it wasn't news to her that he was building a time machine,
Right.
So you know, she at that point she had probably been accustomed to it.
It's like the
So-
Pepper Potts Iron Man scene where it's just like,
Right.
come on, be honest. This isn't the weirdest thing you walked in on me doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's
Okay.
time travel. She was like, I'll see you in a week.
Yeah. Or in 10 minutes.
Or true, depending on when he comes back.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you brought a woman. Good.
Yeah, it was interesting though because the movie starts as the time travel or the time machine story starts with
Right.
with the inventor and this. I don't think in the book he had a name, but they make him H.G. Wells in this movie. But yeah, he's having a dinner party. He shows his friends the time machine.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and then
True.
and then
Man,
obviously,
it's been so long since we've watched that movie.
well, yeah, but also I think it was more closer, obviously, to the
book.
book than that movie was. Because you know he didn't have a girlfriend that died or whatever. He's just like, I'm in a machine.
Mhm.
Look at it. I'm gonna use it one day.
Although H.G. Wells in real life his wife was Amy Robbins or
Oh, the
whatever.
name was right.
The name was right,
Okay.
but I read that he was like a total dick and would sleep around with other women, but like expected her to not have a problem with it because he believed that like men should be able to sleep with whoever they want and his wife should be chaste because they need to keep up appearances for the men. He's kind
Wow.
of a dick.
So it's like the opposite.
Basically.
It's opposite of
Exactly
the
the
H.G. Wells
opposite.
in the
Sorry
movie.
to burst your bubble.
Revisionist history here.
Real life H.G. Wells, kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
As many men in
And this
history
is to
are.
say, like, you know, it's like when you find out the man wasn't like a jerk in history, you're like, whoa, like that's more surprising.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, like so cool. I think anytime I hear about anyone who was before the year 2000 being like a good dude, I'm like, wow, that was awesome. How progressive. I was reading an interview. This is unrelated to this movie, but related to this kind of idea. I was reading this interview with Michelle Yeoh. We went to go see Crazy Rich Asians yesterday, which you guys should support.
Mhm.
But they were talking to Michelle Yeoh, and she was saying when she did the James Bond movie, it was her first American movie,
Which Bond movie was
and that was in Tomorrow Never Dies.
Okay.
I believe. Was it? Yeah, with Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, his second one or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
the second one, the one
Yeah.
after Golden. Everyone kind of forgets it because it's the one after GoldenEye, which people love, and it's right in between the other James Bond Pierce Brosnan movie.
The Halle Berry one?
I believe it's right between the Halle. No, because he did one other before after that.
Yeah, I can't
The World
remember.
is Not Enough. Was
The
that
World
one?
is Not
Oh, yeah, with the submarine, yeah.
The World is Not Enough. So it's
Yeah.
in between these two very World is Not Enough and GoldenEye are very well known. So for some reason, this one doesn't get as well remembered. Anyway, not to get off track. The point is, Michelle Yeoh talking about Pierce Brosnan really advocating for her on set to do her stunts, to do her fight, and she's described him as like a proud dad
Aw.
that she got to do like
That's
everything,
great.
and he was really like an advocate for her getting to change things like in the script and in her characters for her to feel like it was more adhered to her. It's like, well, he's in his mind, she was already a star who just happened to be doing an American
Yeah,
movie.
she's badass.
And you're
She's alongside Jackie Chan kicking ass.
Right? And so
Yeah.
you're thinking, like, man, Pierce Brosnan, who I've met, it's like, what a nice guy. And it was like, but it's like you hear, every time I hear a story about, and then this actor on set in the 90s, like, oh no, like, I'm about to hear something horrible about a man.
Yeah.
And so whenever you hear them say, no, they were nice and very progressive, you're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is not the case here, but,
Yeah.
you know, the movie tries to make him better. which
Him
I
and
guess
Dr.
is
Seuss, man,
good.
just
Ugh.
jerks.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
let's talk about the time travel,
Sure.
since we're kind of getting into it.
We got ourselves a good old fashioned time machine.
It's been a while since we
Yeah.
have, thank
It's
you,
been.
since we've had a solid time machine in a movie. Like a physical solid time
The
machine.
last one might be Meet the Robinsons.
Has it been that long?
I mean, maybe. I feel that feels like it's not that long ago, but that may have been.
Yeah,
So it
that
might
was
be-
a while ago.
It might be Meet the Robinsons. That might be the last one we've done with a proper time machine.
Anyway, it was nice. And, as we mentioned, H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine, the novel.
Right.
And in this story, he has not written that yet.
Right.
He instead has invented a time machine and wants to use it, but he's a little bit cowardly. And so his
Understandably
friend,
so.
his friend Jack the Ripper, who doesn't realize he's Jack the Ripper.
What an interesting sentence.
His friend Jack the Ripper uses it to escape when the police close in on him.
Yeah.
And that's how the adventure starts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a clip. Do you want to show that? I guess we can get that out of the way.
He explains in 1893, he explains to his friends at the dinner party, including Jack the Ripper, how it works. And so that's this scene.
12 years ago, a French engineer harnessed the power of the sun to run a printing press. My time machine derives its power from the very same source.
Can't be serious. You mean this thing is propelled by sunshine?
This cup catches the rays of the sun, converting its heat to electricity here. Electricity does the rest, juxtaposing fields of energy, creating friction. The result is an ever-increasing series of reactions that lifts or literally rotates the machine out of one time sphere into another. The cruising speed is 2 years per minute. You can go into the past or future at will.
2 years per minute.
Acceleration will keep the machine and its occupant outside all time spheres, in a conscious but vaporized state.
How do you determine which direction you're journeying?
Well, if you rotate to the west, you gain yesterdays. To the east, you accumulate tomorrows.
Balderdash. Go north, you get to Glasgow.
The machine is designed with several safety features. The reversal rotation lock automatically returns the machine to its starting date after the completion of a voyage. If the occupant is injured during the course of a flight, the passenger is returned to the point of departure. Unless he uses this key to countermand the device.
Without that key, then, the thing's a bloody homing pigeon.
And what, may I ask, is this? Well, John, this is the vaporizing equalizer. Without it, the passenger journeys through time without the machine. And without the machine, there is no coming back.
Pretty ominous.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, that is what happens at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
The Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
I mean, that pretty much covers all the mechanics.
The vaporizing equalizer.
Yeah.
I love that.
I wrote that down as soon as you said it. I was like, all right.
That's pretty great. I also wanted to mention that the display dash of like point of origin and then destination, I definitely think Back to the Future was inspired by this look.
Yeah.
Because it's very similar. Just kind of how it's laid out is pretty similar. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of were inspired by how it looked. I'm sure they watched this movie, so.
Yeah, I did want to note that the whole thing is driven by sunlight, but it's always indoors, and usually at nighttime that they use it, so like...
Yeah, he should at least have a sky... Well, actually, didn't the police look at a skylight when they were trying to search for Jack the Ripper? They're like,
true.
oh yeah, he didn't get out through the skylight, so I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense
maybe
because it's in a
it
basement.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, but that's also at nighttime, so...
Yeah, I mean, unless it stores the battery power.
That's
Yeah,
true. Maybe he
that is
has... Maybe
He
he
charges
has
it up.
invented a solar panel that beams through... I don't know.
But, I mean...
He also could... what if he trapped... Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, the sun doesn't give us that much energy in a little cup. You need to have like a Dyson
It's a big
sphere.
cup, to be fair,
Yeah.
but yes.
Yeah, you need like a Dyson sphere to encompass an entire sun to like harness that much energy. But obviously more than that to travel through time. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a little ridiculous, obviously, but it's sci-fi.
Yes. And why don't you explain, kind of recap what he said? So
Yeah.
he invented this machine, and it works 2 years per minute. That's how you can either go to the past or the future, which I appreciate about the time machine, by the way, that you can kind of go whichever one you wish.
Yeah, it seems like it doesn't move through space on its own power. I think because you said that it like keeps you in a little time bubble that you like vaporize, and so you're not affected by the outside time. But the machine could be moved because when he comes in the future, he's now in San Francisco because they unearthed it and moved it to San Francisco. So
Right.
he's like in it in like a time stasis.
Oh,
And then once
the machine itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
the machine, the outside of the machine,
I
but
didn't-
similar to the Time Machine, the other movie that we
Right.
covered.
Except that one stayed.
It stayed still because no one moved it really.
Oh, but if someone had moved, okay,
Yeah.
I understand. I
Right.
didn't like put that together, but that totally makes sense. I was like, why is he in San Francisco?
It's
Whatever.
actually one of the more clever points of the movie,
Yeah.
that the fact that, like, no, that spear stays the same. He thought he was going to be in London, but because they found it and moved to San Francisco, that's just where he
Yeah,
is.
and then he got out of the machine. His stasis bubble popped, and then he walked out, and the machine had moved, so now he's in San Francisco. But it's funny because he was like, "Oh, I should be there at like 11 o'clock," and it's like 3 o'clock, and he's like, "Oh, 8 hours difference." Okay, so he like got the time right. It was just he was in a different time zone.
Mm-hmm. Which that whatever. I have a question though. So he kind of explains it that how did the machine go back? So because H.G. Wells had the key, Jack the Ripper used it to go to 1979 first, and then the machine came back to H.G. Wells.
Yeah, I was trying to.
How does that work?
In the clip, he like didn't really explain it that well.
Yeah.
I guess if you, yeah, it's kind of like a plot device, really, more than anything. But I guess if you don't have the,
You can use it once without the key, but it will just then revert back to where it
Yeah.
came from.
Yeah, 'cause he
Versus
said
if
unless-
you used it with the key, it will stay until you go somewhere
Like,
else.
yeah, you have
if you
full
go with
control
the key,
over it.
then yeah. Okay, that I guess checks out.
but it is kind of like, I mean, how does it? I guess technically, okay. So he arrives in San Francisco and he sees his exhibit, and he lived a life after that point because like there's a portrait of him at 60 whatever, and all the stuff was there. So it like the future happened as if he stayed there, or maybe I guess it always happened that way because he eventually went back.
I think because of this story, what happened always happened.
Okay.
Right.
That's kind of
Yeah.
nothing ever changes.
That's
so
true, yeah.
I was under the impression that because all those things still existed in that museum, he was never he never, not to use a double negative, but he never didn't go back
Right,
to this
right.
time.
Right.
He always went.
always went back.
He always went back to
He became a fiction writer.
1893.
Okay.
Yes, and so maybe how he ended up becoming a fiction writer and things like that, maybe you could say has changed, but not really, because the actions of him going to 1979 always happened.
Right.
Right.
So he always invented this machine. Jack the Ripper always stole it. He always chased after him, etc. He always goes back, I guess, with Amy
Mm-hmm.
because they
They
think
get married.
she's dead. Yeah.
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 I do wonder though, like, why did it disappear then? Because if Jack the Ripper is in a time bubble, then wouldn't the machine still be there and could, like he could then move it around to his will? Like
You
how
mean when?
back in 1893?
beginning?
Yeah. If H.G. Wells used it to move to the future, how did people then find it and move it around if it had vanished in the past? Like, shouldn't there be a machine just sitting there and, like, I don't know, you see a stasis bubble of Jack the Ripper sitting there, or whatever, if you had the power to see that? Like why would it disappear if, you know, if it could be
okay.
moved around and all
It
that
took me a
stuff?
while to kind of figure out what you were trying to ask.
Yeah.
So you're saying, how come the machine itself disappears at the very end of the movie? Because
Yeah,
they take
yeah.
it back, but then it should also then reappear, maybe?
Yeah, but that and also because in the beginning it disappears too. Like, shouldn't it always be there and the person on the inside disappears?
Yes.
Yeah.
It
Almost
should
like
be.
it duplicates itself to go in time. Not literally, but
Yeah.
you know,
Like it's a constant.
like a ghost of it.
Right.
Like goes, does what it does.
Yeah,
but I would imagine that would probably be. I wouldn't even say that that's something they didn't think of, but I would say it's probably too confusing for a normal audience to
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
understand
I
what is
agree.
going on.
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, the movies. I mean, even with that plot hole, the movie's still pretty like easy to follow.
Or they, you could also say that maybe he did end up ultimately changing the time by dismantling the machine, and that's why it disappears at the very end. And he doesn't want anyone to find it.
Right.
Mhm.
He's
You could
also
say.
like said like, okay, no, this is not going to be ever in this museum.
So, yeah, but then in that sense, that would change things. So then he
Yeah.
didn't always go back to 1979.
Unless he's closing the loop.
That's true.
Yeah,
That could be.
I know, and you know, I'm just like I was just thinking of how it was always there because you can move it around, but then it disappeared. I was trying to like marry those two facts in my brain, but you know, I don't need that to.
Either
That's not like
way,
a
it's
sticky
kind
point
of
either way. Yeah, it's
Either way,
fine.
how you explain it is kind of going to cause a little bit of a
Yeah.
plot hole. I did like, though, that you can use the machine once without the key, almost like it stores one use
Right.
without the key, like on its own.
Yeah,
But then with the key, you can use it an infinite amount of times, essentially, as long as there's a sun.
But to go to
And
the,
the equalizing vaporizer.
right,
Yeah.
just don't go to like the distant future like he does in the original time with Guy
and
Pearce.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so that's, I guess, how the time machine works. The equalizing vaporizer we need to talk about, though. That is what stabilizes you, I guess, in the machine, or that's like
Yeah.
that's
It
what
keeps
keeps
it
you.
keeps you all together in your time bubble with the machine.
Yes,
Um,
and so if that's missing,
shouldn't there be more?
less easy to get
Yeah.
out? Yes.
Like
Yeah.
locked or
Just
something.
do some sort of protocol. I guess
also should not be on the outside of the machine.
Right.
Yeah.
I
I know
guess
it just
it's a
walks by and pulls it out.
guess it's a fail safe in case someone. I guess in case of this very situation with Jack the Ripper, where it's like someone who you don't want to time travel, because unless you've made the machine, you wouldn't know. So I
Right.
guess it's his way of being like, don't try to steal this machine from me.
But I feel like I know there's like ridges on it, so but like he still just pulled it out.
Yeah, he's just like
Like a key.
even
Although yeah, maybe he had turned it a few times on the way out. I guess.
right, maybe I don't know. I mean, Jack the Ripper instantly knows what's about to happen. He's like, I messed up.
Yeah.
He was like, what was I thinking?
But also, there was no way for him to avoid that because he couldn't travel. Like, if he took it out, he still couldn't travel with it.
Right,
Versus, like, if he waited, there was no way
right.
to avoid that happening for Jack the Ripper.
Mm.
Yeah, it was funny though. H.G. Wells like I sent him to infinity. When
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Infinity and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's kind of in a endless void of
I guess he's just always going forward in
nothingness.
time. I guess
Yeah.
because he doesn't have a way to stop it. Like because if you're in the time bubble, you're like moving forward, but you have the machine. You can stop the machine.
Controls.
Yeah. But if you
Right.
just keep going forward, then you're never gonna stop, and you're just gonna always be in this weird vaporized time bubble.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
It's a bad way to go.
I mean, he's a horrible dude, to be fair. It's not
Yeah.
like, I mean,
Yeah.
this is literally a guy who gets a second chance in life and is like, I need to kill more people.
Yeah.
It reminded me of
That's true.
there's a character in Rick and Morty voiced by Andy Daly. He's just like a killer for hire, but he's like really chipper and really happy about it. And like before mission, he's like, "Oh boy, here I go killing again." Like, I just remember, I feel like that's what Jack the Ripper's like.
He's just like, yeah, no, that's pretty much what he does. I mean, the movie opens with a POV shot of you seeing him kill.
Which I really liked, by the way.
It was really well done. It was really well done. And then you realize it's like how terrible this person is really early on.
Yeah. I thought they did a good job with his character, though. I felt that, like, it's not even so much that he enjoyed killing, but that he had to.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's like it's his nature to be.
He just
that.
doesn't. That's just what he knows. He
It's just
doesn't know
compulsive.
anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also a good commentary too, because obviously they show the TV and how everyone's violent, and he's like, I'm
Right.
an amateur now. Like these people, they love killing, and so he's like, I'm just gonna keep
Mhm.
doing it because
Yeah,
It's what I do, and-
I love that scene too.
yeah,
I liked that conversation and just kind of their dynamic together of he's not wrong. I mean, obviously he's wrong for killing people, but
Right.
like he's not incorrect by what he's saying to H.G. Wells. Like your utopia that you expected, it doesn't exist, and I would still correct that man is still going to do what man does, which is hunt and kill and whatever
Yeah.
he says in the beginning of the movie. So
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, it's good writing, I would say.
yeah,
The other thing that they used the machine for was he was trying to convince Amy that he's from the future or from the past, and so
Right.
he goes forward 3 days, while still in the exhibit, and they get a newspaper from 3 days in the future, and they see that she's killed in the article.
By Jack the Ripper.
Presumably killed. But the headline says Amy, murdered.
Is the 5th victim of Jack the Ripper, and there's a picture of her.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, they're not going to say, "Oh, I wonder if this is true." Obviously, if you see it in the newspaper, you're not going to be suspicious. So.
Right.
So, yeah, from that point, then obviously that becomes the big kind of drama driving the rest of the movie, yeah. Which I didn't mind. I'm glad it wasn't earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
Because I think it would have dragged on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
But it was not bad.
Yeah, it was the same trope of someone looking at a newspaper, but it didn't change. When they realized that he murdered her friend, she was like, oh, the newspaper was just wrong because it was a dead body in her apartment, so they assumed it was her.
Right. And then she also was not there. So
yeah, right.
That also adds to it.
Though it does add to it's interesting is they end up actually throwing themselves kind of back into danger because they realize, oh my gosh, he's killing people. We have to go back to prevent the other people he's going to kill. We have to stop him from killing other people. Which is, surprisingly, a lot of characters in time travel movies are kind of a-holes. So it's actually kind of refreshing that a character's like, let's go back in time, even though we could totally just get away with this now and like be safe. No, let's actually go back in time to help people. Surprisingly, not a lot of movies where people want to go back in time to help people.
Yeah, that's true. I liked that too. And then events still unfolded how they were going to unfold. And I appreciated that too. I really liked how the time travel effects unfolded and how they tried to change things and nothing kind of changed. Mm-hmm. Everything still stayed as it was. Yeah. I liked that about this movie.
Yeah, because he tries to change things. Like, oh, we had to stop the Ripper. He's going to kill someone at this time. But he was either too late or whatever, and the cops think he's the one that's doing it, so he gets, in jail, and it kind of makes it happen.
It kind of reminds me of Triangle, I guess, in that sense of just, you try and change things, and then you end up just kind of doing the same. Obviously, it's different, but you end up getting to the same result.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And you don't end up changing anything. Anyway, that's a great movie.
Yeah.
So, we kind of mentioned consequences, but obviously, Amy's impending doom is somewhat of a consequence, and then it ends up, obviously, he saves her, and they leave together.
Yeah, the knowledge of stuff. I mean, obviously, we mentioned being able to be sent to infinity. It's a big consequence.
Yeah. And I would say, you mentioned kind of the knowledge of wherever you're going, and lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
I would say as well. But because of these rules, you can't change anything, so that makes it a little bit better to travel through time in this.
Because it's always as they say, the river is going to self-correct itself.
Right.
No matter what you do.
It was interesting because we always talk about people leaving their time altogether, which Amy does at the end. But at least there was a scene where she's like, no, I can't. I have a life here. I have a job. I have a career. And then she's like, plus the past sucks for me. I don't want to be some housewife, So I'm glad that they at least had that. And at the end, she eventually just was like, oh, screw it. I'm going to go with you anyways and just throw caution to the wind. But at least she thought about it and protested at first as opposed to being like, sure.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. Not that it meant anything in the end, but that it was,
Well, he was always destined to marry her, though hopefully in this version of H.G. Wells, he's much more feminist and progressive husband.
Hopefully. Or she at least wouldn't stand for it.
Yeah. Right.
This version.
For sure.
Oh, this movie. So, scientific accuracy, I know you kind of mentioned the stuff about the sun already. Was there anything else you wanted to...
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like, it's the same idea of, all sci-fi stuff, making all this stuff happen. There's no wormhole that he uses. At least they mention, a energy force field that he's in. When we see the time travel sequence happen, it's all trippy and stuff. But he starts to pass out while he's doing it, so it's obviously taking a toll on him physically. But it's using energy to envelop him and make him go through time. Obviously pure sci-fi. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So the time travel is a little bit more relevant to the story than I guess I was expecting. We see it in the beginning, we see it at the end, but they do use it that one time kind of the beginning of the third act when he goes 3 days in the future to
Yeah.
kind of prove to her. So, I did appreciate that, and it was about the time travel more, a little bit more than some other A to B, B to A,
Right.
location plot.
Yeah, for sure.
Stories.
Yeah. Without the newspaper retrieval from the future, it would have been okay. They're in the present and they go back to the past.
Right. Okay. Clothes and sets. Anything you wanted to mention?
Very 70s clothes, but it's modern times, but it's just like, it's very 70s. Like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness.
The
this is
hair, the vibe,
Yeah, the makeup and stuff.
hmm
And his clothes obviously were period piece clothes, but at one point Amy was like, "Oh, your buttons are weird." So I guess they have weird buttons in the 1800s.
Sure. I mean,
She's
I would imagine.
very astute.
Yeah.
Very
She's very
astute of
observant. I wanted to mention they made in 2017. ABC released they remade this
They did.
movie as a TV
Yeah.
show, and it only aired for 5 episodes. They made 12 episodes, but it only aired for 5 before they canceled it. So I imagine it's
Interesting.
probably pretty good.
Yeah, I remember this when this
But-
came out. I was like, H.G. Wells chasing Jack the Ripper. What the hell kind of story is that? And then I realized it was
Mhm.
reboot. And was like, oh, okay.
But what's interesting is the H.G. Wells in the TV show they make to look pretty similar to Malcolm McDowell's character in this movie. I thought was kind of funny. I saw a picture. Yeah, I saw a picture of it.
he had like little mustache and
pulled up.
stuff.
Yeah,
I've never heard of this TV show.
I feel like it came out when there was like Timeless had come out and
Yeah.
all this stuff and whatever. Trying to find a photo. Let's see.
We were looking on the photo gallery, by the way, on imdb.com.
So you can look it up
Okay.
and follow along.
Right.
I thought I saw a photo and he had like a mustache and stuff, but maybe not. Although I mean, that's kind of a modern day look of it, I guess. He has the small glasses
Yeah,
and
long
blonde hair.
glasses.
He's too like pretty boy TV show for
Yeah.
it, but that's alright. So if anyone watched the 5 episodes of that show, let us know how it was. I'm very curious.
You're one of the few who did, so
Yeah.
please,
I
please
mean,
tell us.
they probably didn't resolve the story. I mean, I imagine they wanted to
Yeah,
have a whole
that's
life
true.
of the show, so they didn't resolve it.
Yeah, it was probably like Quantum Leap, seems like,
Right.
just kind of going through time and solving problems, I would imagine. Which is what
Chasing
most time
after
travel
Jack the
TV
Ripper.
shows are, yeah.
It was funny. We watched Mission Impossible a few weeks ago, and the foot chase scene. I was like, this is reminding me of Mission Impossible Fallout when they're like chasing each other out the city. 'Cause
Oh,
he's like
yeah!
different levels, and he's like, look,
There's
well,
like wide shots of them
Yeah.
running, and yeah, that's pretty funny.
Clear elevators. Like, I see him!
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't mind. I thought some of the chase scenes were a little bit too long, but I didn't mind them. They were interesting enough and felt they did a good job.
Anytime you do a movie in San Francisco, there has to be a chase scene. Any action movie in San Francisco, because of all the hills and all like the vistas, it's just
Yeah.
one of those cities that everyone likes to do chase scenes through.
Well, it's also more interesting because it's from the 70s, and so not only is the city from the 70s, but it's shot differently. Like nowadays, all the driving actions are close shot and it's like quick cuts. But here you have a shot of some guy turning a corner and he like hits a car, so you see more of like the scene as opposed to just like someone's rearview mirror as they like drift around a corner. So I don't know. I like that more than modern day chase scenes.
You
Right.
can actually see the stunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all about, like, I love Jackie Chan and his earlier stuff. Well, I mean, even his newer stuff. It's, like, full wide shots, and you see him make contact. You see him fly through the air. Like, as opposed to, like, Jean-Claude Van Damme, where it's, like, punch, and it's a quick cut of someone flying through the air. It's like, no, you see the entire shot. So,
Oh, JCVD.
yeah.
Oh, Time Cop. Okay. Would you guys want to experience this time travel?
Well, I mean, you can't affect anything as you learn. So I guess if you time travel, you've always been meant to time travel. So I mean, as long as no one pulls out that little key on the outside of the door, you're
vaporize
good.
an equalizer.
Yeah,
And if you had the key to the machine with you.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I wouldn't do a one-way trip. I would
No.
definitely want to
Yes.
do. You had to come back.
I would hide it like Marty does in Back to the Future. I wouldn't like... Although, actually, keeping it in a museum like that is actually pretty clever.
Yeah, in plain sight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I like the way that he did it too. Because before he left, he like got valuables to like try to sell them in the present day. He was like,
That
"I'll
was
need,
smart.
I'll need something to like trade something because who knows what it'll be like in the future."
Yeah. So would you experience it?
I think so. That like the machine, if you know what you're doing, you have the right materials, and there isn't a murderer in the midst. I think it's pretty decent. And in the end, he got a wife, and he fell in love, and went back to his time. So either way, I say yes.
Cool. Any other notes you guys had about the film that you wanted to mention? You mentioned the newspaper trope.
I love the joke he makes where they're in the revolving restaurant and he says like, this is so much better than that Scottish food I had this morning. He's like, Scottish food? And he says McDonald's. And I'm like,
I didn't think about that joke. That's funny.
Okay.
That was just really funny. I was like, ah.
I was just like, I have no idea what he's talking about.
But yeah, I thought it meant like his actual breakfast in 1893. I was like, oh yeah, the food sucked back then.
Right. No, it's just like one of those weird like little throwaway jokes. You're just like, oh, interesting.
That is really funny.
That's good.
Okay. So, should we do final reviews, I guess?
Sure, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay.
This is just a little thing. It's so funny I thought about it now because you're talking about the TV show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this just continues my theory that any major release film is someone's favorite movie. Because someone had to think this is my favorite movie to think, I'm going to make a whole TV show about this.
Okay.
That's true.
My theory still holds weight.
I did want to mention I saw this movie was Corey Feldman's first feature film role. He plays if you've seen this movie, there's a little boy in the museum who like goes up to the door when H.G. Wells first goes to 1979, and he's a little boy in the museum. There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Fun fact. So, Matt, why don't you start?
For the movie, I think for what it is, it's pretty good. For 1979, there's at this point obviously some amazing classics already made. So this isn't a Oscar, well, I don't know. There may be some awards for it, but it's not on the caliber of amazing,
nothing big,
Oscar-worthy movies. But it's still pretty good. I enjoyed it for what it is. The cast is great. Obviously, Malcolm McDowell, Amy Steenburgen. They're both pretty solid.
Amy Steenburgen?
Mary.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think it's almost 2 hours, so obviously nowadays I wished it was shorter because they take their time in some scenes. And so at certain points I'm just like, all right, come on, I'm ready to be done with the movie by now. But that was only just because I'm more patient and it's 2018. So I'm going to give it a 7 because overall it's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think it was a little bit too long. Even if it was like an hour 45, I think would have been nicer. I enjoyed this movie. I liked the writing and the directing was, pretty decent. I actually really like the movie poster that's on IMDb. I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, I don't know what I would kind of do differently about this movie. I think it's pretty clean and nothing too bad or too great. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it as like a great time travel movie that people need to see, but it's also not a bad one if you're interested in, action adventure kind of sci-fi time travel. So I agree, 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right with you guys. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's well directed. It's well written. The cast is likable. It's a concept that is actually kind of a weird concept, but they pull it off really well, and they managed to keep the story moving. And one of the big things is you have to buy the relationship between Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen, and you do probably because they also were really feeling each other at the time, apparently.
Yeah.
But you do buy their chemistry, and you do buy their relationship, and that makes the story more likable. I think sometimes it has that very weird 70s kind of like pacing issue, and I agree with you guys. It's about 10 minutes too long. Some of the fight scenes are a little oddly directed and choreographed, but in the end, it was enjoyable. I probably won't watch it again anytime soon, but at the same time, if I was someplace and like, hey, we're going to watch this movie, I wouldn't be like, oh, no, I don't want to watch that. It's got enough of charm in it. So I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10 as far as a movie.
Nice. Time travel. I love the Time Machine book. The idea of the time machine, it's classic. And, for what it is, it's pretty solid as far as, like, you get in it, you put in your destination, and, it doesn't really, it's not like a spaceship. You get in it, and it takes you through time. It's pretty solid. I do have some issues with the sci-fi as how it all comes together and using sunlight when it's clearly not in sunlight. But the idea of like being in this, time stasis bubble is pretty cool. And, there's no real huge inconsistencies. We see the future and then we see how it doesn't actually change. Like, in the 3 days in which they get the newspaper. But we just find out, oh, they're just wrong in the future. But everything still happened the way that we knew it was going to happen. And I'm going to give it, I'll just give it a 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
I liked these rules. I thought they were pretty clean, and I don't really have an issue with the whole sunlight thing. It could have been sunlight, it could have been some sort of a battery thing that he invented. Didn't really bother me either way. I liked kind of some of the terms that he used, like the equalizing vaporizer was pretty funny, and I like that you can go past or future, you can kind of decide where you want to go, and I agree about the stasis bubble, that the machine itself stays where it physically is, wherever you go, that's where it's going to be, and so I appreciated that aspect to it, especially now that I understand like why he was in San Francisco. I didn't catch that in the movie, but that's just me, so I appreciated that. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Nice, yeah. The time trial, I've kind of gone back and forth on how I feel about it. There are a few holes in it. It doesn't necessarily break its rules, but there are a few holes in time travel. That being said, I actually think this movie does a better job of displaying the time machine than the time machine.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
The time machine talks about, like, you can't change the past, you can't do all this stuff, and it does it in a much more nihilistic way. Here, it much more embraces that of, like, things are just the way they are, and you don't belong in certain times, and you just need to accept that. And, like, but some things that happen are just meant to happen, and there's some good about that, too. So, that kind of makes you feel like I need to give it a little bit higher than what I would like, than a 5, just because it's like, well, it's done a little bit more with the concept than a lot of other films in a way that's not overbearing and hitting us on the head with it, and also opening itself up to a bevy of plot holes. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 with its time travel.
Yeah, I just remembered that movie too. That movie, he kept going back and to try to save his wife.
Right.
That movie, They didn't care about duplication. That I think that was a big plot hole for us in the terms of time travel. But in this movie, they thankfully didn't have any of that issue. They just were like, all right, I'm going to go to this day, and then maybe a little bit in the future, and then back to the past. So I'm glad that they avoided that whole question.
Duplicate problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't go to the same time twice, so it's not an issue. So on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie's actually at 86%, but there's not that many reviews, considering it's an older movie. The critics' consensus says, with the 3 principal actors clearly having fun with their roles, time after time becomes an amusing, lighthearted fantasy lark. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
71% of audiences liked it. Average critic rating is 7.2 out of 10. So that's pretty close to where we were. Okay, so our next episode is Hyde's final choice.
Cool.
Wow, no pressure. What'd you pick?
I chose the show Continuum, which ran on Sci-Fi Channel and Showcase in Canada from 2012 to 2015. I actually used to religiously watch the show because it came on Friday nights and I recorded it. We're going to start with the pilot, A Stitch in Time, which is also one of the highest rated episodes. Not the highest. Actually, I think their series finale is the highest rated episode. But that would have been very hard to be satisfying for Matt and Jen to watch without having watched the entire show.
Right.
So we're going to stick to the beginning because it does explain everything and set up the show pretty well. Stars Rachel Nichols, who people might remember as playing Scarlet in the G.I. Joe movie with like Marlon Wayans and Channing Tatum. Yeah, I know,
That's
right?
what people know her from? Really?
I mean, Star Trek, she was the green-skinned woman.
Okay, yeah.
That's
so.
like some of her biggest roles. She's been in a lot of movies, but those I think are the ones where she's like most like, oh yeah, it's her.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, fair
So
enough.
yeah, the show's Officer Kira Cameron and terrorist group Liberate are transported back in time. Kira quickly finds out on a new mission with a new identity. That is a very, very basic way of describing the first episode. But we're going to get more into that when we actually get into the episode.
Okay.
Cool. I'm excited to talk about it and see it. I've never seen this show.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, so.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, social media, we are at Time Travel Trio on Twitter and Instagram if you'd like to follow us. We are the Time Travel Trio podcast on Facebook. We are on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. If you follow, rate, subscribe, whatever, comment on one of those, we'd appreciate it. I am personally at Jen Marlis on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am at Foreman in Space.
And I'm at Robinson is Hyde.
And
with that,
we are out of
time.